Hey everyone, so before I get into the meat of this video, I thought I'd explain the art that you're going to be seeing throughout this, if you're watching it. Um, it is my art, and it's for a charity project called Red Velvet. It's a fashion calendar revolving around the 12th Doctor from Doctor Who, and all the proceeds from the calendar will go to the humanitarian aid program for Venezuela. So I'm not allowed to show the finished product, so you're not going to see the finished piece in this video. If you want to see the finished piece, you can buy the calendar, and there's a link down below for that. Now on to the video. Hi everyone, my name is Victoria. I'm going to skip right past the intro for this video and go right into the explanation of what the heck it is. I've been reading the Bible in 1 year, and as I go through the Old Testament, I'm struck by all the stories that are either taken out of context in Christian and secular culture, or just ignored altogether. Now, some of these stories are funny, many are disturbing, but all are really interesting, so I thought I'd do a little series on them, paraphrasing them with modern vernacular, and giving them a little context. As a disclaimer, this is not meant to be scholarly. I'm not doing a bunch of research into this. I am just telling the stories as accurately as I can. Also, I apologize in advance if I use a lot of religious terms. I'll try to avoid them or explain them as I go along. So the first story starts in Genesis 20. Genesis is the first book of the Bible, but it's 50 chapters long and it spans a really long length of time. So Genesis 20 is right in the middle of the story of Abraham and his wife Sarah. Now, Abraham is the founding father of the Israelites. He was handpicked by God, etc., etc. And he's married to his wife. And around this time, Abraham is about 100 years old, but that doesn't really mean anything. I mean, they imply that it is old, but people around this time were living to be like 900. So, he could just be in his 20s in our time. Abraham and his wife Sarah are living in the Negev, and this is before Israel was founded as a nation, and Abraham was a very rich nomad. His 80-something-year-old wife was also apparently super hot. So while they were settled in the region of Gerar for a bit, Abraham didn't introduce Sarah as his wife, but as his sister. You might wonder why God would put up with such a blatant lie in his chosen person, and it's because technically it wasn't a lie. Sarah was Abraham's half-sister. They were different times. So because Abraham was claiming that Sarah was his sister, pretty soon the king of Gerar, named Abimelek, was super into Sarah and so just took her for his wife. And Abraham let him. Maybe because he knew God would intercede, maybe because he was a coward, who knows. But the point is that God did intercede. He made everyone in Abimelek's house barren. And Abimelek apparently had a bunch of wives and concubines. And in a culture where your worth as a man and a woman was determined by your kids, that was a huge deal. So then, after he made everyone barren, God appears to Abimelek in a dream and rats Abraham out, saying that the king would die if he slept with Sarah because she was already married. Sarah had been living with him for a while at this time, but he had never slept with her. So Abimelek, who is, I guess, used to deities coming to him in his dreams, says, "Oh God, don't punish my nation for the lie of some foreigner. Didn't he tell me that she was his sister? If I'd known she was taken, I wouldn't have brought her into my house." And God's like, "Chill, man. Why do you think I kept you from touching her? I knew you weren't in the wrong. Just give her back and ask Abraham to pray for you, because he's my prophet, and you're not allowed to take revenge on him for this." So the next morning, Abimelek summons Abraham and gives him his wife back in return for an explanation. Abraham says he knows his wife is totally hot, and since Abimelek and his people didn't fear God, he was afraid that they'd kill Abraham in order to get to Sarah. Well, if the king didn't fear God before, he definitely did now. Not only did he give Abraham Sarah back, but he also gave him a bunch of livestock and his choice of land in the area. He also paid Abraham 1,000 shekels of silver, which is about 25 pounds. But our boy Abimelek isn't a total simp. He made sure to passive-aggressively call Abraham Sarah's brother, which I totally love him for. Abimelek is like one of my favorite characters. So then Abraham prays for Abimelek, and he and his wives are able to have children again. And soon afterwards, Sarah, who has also been barren this entire time, like ever since she was born, became pregnant with her first child at almost 100 years of age. But the story of Abimelek doesn't end there. Oh gosh. So years later, and we're talking decades later, Abraham's firstborn Isaac moves to Gerar during a famine. And wouldn't you know it, he has a dummy-thick wife named Rebecca. Turns out the apple doesn't fall far from the tree of cowardice, as Isaac introduces his wife as his sister out of fear for being killed over her. But our boy Abimelek is wise to the family of Ben Abraham. So he looks down from his palace one day and sees Isaac and his supposed sister having a makeout session or something, and immediately catches on to his lying. So he brings him in and he flips out on him. It's a big deal to him as a king. Since the last time one of the Hebrew women was taken, his whole house got plagued. So Isaac explains he's too much of a wimp to stand up for his wife, so Abimelek does it for him. He tells his nation if Isaac or any of his family is harmed, the perpetrator would be put to death. Even though Abimelek wasn't a Hebrew, he's one of those characters with a great connection and respect for God, and I love whenever he comes up in Genesis. So that was the first story. If any of you had ever been taught about Abimelek in your Sunday school class, let me know, but I sure as heck never heard of Abimelek until I started reading through the Bible for myself, and he's one of my favorite characters. I love the characters in the Bible that aren't specifically chosen by God. They aren't part of the Israelite nation, and yet they still recognize God's deity and choose to obey him. Maybe it's because I find that much more relatable myself as a non-Jew, but I think it's really cool because also it takes away a lot of the myth of God being very exclusionary. Like if you read Genesis, God is very inclusive of all peoples. It's just that he's kind of chosen this one group to be his mouthpiece. Alright, so I've got 2 more stories I want to go over for this video. This next one comes with a pretty heavy trigger warning because it has really heavy themes of assault, followed by the most extreme revenge plot in history. So if you're sensitive on the subject of sexual assault, please skip this one. The time codes are in the description down below, and also here's the time code you can skip to. I will also probably be making jokes at the expense of the abuser because he deserves no dignity, but those jokes are in no way meant to downsize his crime. He is the scum of the earth and deserved what he got. So this story begins with a sister to the 12 sons of Israel. The sister's name was Dinah. Her father Israel and his family had recently settled in the land of Canaan. While they were there, Shechem the Hittite, the prince of the land, saw Dinah and fell in love with her. But instead of courting her or asking her for her hand in marriage, he raped her. Then he had the audacity to claim love for her and said to his father, quote, "Get me this girl for my wife." Footnote. Many years later, when Moses organized the 12 tribes into a nation with laws, men who assaulted women in this way were required to marry their victims. However, this wasn't a punishment, but meant as more of a preventative measure. Family and inheritance were integral to the economy and cultural structure of Israel, so forcing a man to marry a woman he took advantage of would cost him a lot of money, and if she had children, which he was required by law to give her, that would cost his family money and land for generations to come. So if a man wanted to avoid this kind of fate, he would not rape women. This is not what happened in Dinah's story. So Shechem and his father Hamor go to Jacob, or Israel, as he was also called, to ask for Dinah to be Shechem's bride, all the while keeping her captive in their palace. The Bible doesn't say how, but Dinah's 10 brothers find out about the assault by the time they come back from tending the livestock. So not only has Dinah been kidnapped and traumatized, but her trauma has been spread across the land. Her brothers are rightfully furious, but still have to listen as the king and his sniveling wimp of a son beg for them to give Dinah to them legally. They offer Jacob and his sons money, prestige, and all the land and trade they want in exchange for her. The brothers agree, with one caveat. We can't give our sister to someone who is uncircumcised, they said. But not only you, every male in your kingdom must be circumcised. Then we'll give our sister to you. So Shechem and Hamor agree, and all the people in the land go along with the plan, since apparently Shechem is the most honored of all the royal family. Just imagine what jerks the rest of the family must have been if the most honorable was a raping asshat. I can't imagine that the whole country agreed at first to this, but it did help that their king promised them a share in all of Israel's wealth and women. Footnote: for those of you who don't know, circumcision is the practice of cutting off the foreskin of a man's penis. Usually it's done when they are babies, so you can imagine how painful that would be on a full-grown man. 3 days later, when all the men had been circumcised and were in a lot of pain as a result, 2 of Dinah's brothers, Simeon and Levi, come into the city with swords and kill every single man, saving Shechem and Hamor for last. Then they rescue Dinah, and the rest of the brothers loot the city and take all the women and children captive. These 10 beasts of men invaded an entire city out of revenge for their sister. When they came home, their dad was upset with them, reminding them that their people were small in number, and if this act of revenge angered other city kings, the family of Jacob would be easily destroyed. The brothers' response? Should we have treated our sister like a prostitute? Reading through this chapter of Genesis, I was so angry for Dinah, especially since Shechem basically held her captive and acted as if he were being generous by wanting to marry her after violating her. So it was so satisfying when her brothers take none of his bullcrap and bribery and go red wedding on his entire city. Was it overkill? Almost definitely. There are some instances in the Bible where it's made clear that a whole city is evil, and that wasn't the case here. The Bible also doesn't commend the brothers as heroes, but I think Shechem 100% deserved what he got, and all abusers deserve the same. As another postscript on this story, I think one thing that gets misunderstood about the Bible a lot is that anything that happens involving a hero in the Bible, that hero is always heroic. That's not the case. These brothers would later go on to sell one of their brothers into slavery. These aren't perfect or even good humans. There are so many stories in the Bible where they just state the facts of what happened and then trust the viewer to know what's right and wrong. So in this story, they don't say whether Jacob was right for not wanting to confront the king. They don't say that the brothers were in the right for taking revenge. The only thing that the story says was blatantly wrong was the rape of Dinah. That's the only thing that is ever explicitly stated to be wrong. And that's true for a lot of other stories in the Bible. All right, on a lighter note, here's a short story about women not being abused in Numbers 26. Numbers is the 4th book in the Bible, and it's continuing the story of Moses' life and the organization of the country of Israel. At this time in Moses' life, he was laying down laws and dividing up land, and he was approached by the 5 daughters of Zelophehad. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but that's what I'm going with. These daughters, named Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah, were Zelophehad's only children. This was a problem, as I mentioned in the previous story that family and inheritance are extremely important for the Jews at this time, and inheritance was passed down through sons. Zelophehad was part of the evil generation doomed to die in the wilderness, but his daughters argued that they shouldn't be punished because their father had given them no brothers to take care of them financially. Moses took their case before the literal God of the universe himself to ask for his advice. Seriously, you guys, the Old Testament is wild. So the God of everything agrees with the women, and even lays down an extended inheritance guideline for the future. Later on, in chapter 36 of Numbers, the daughters of Zelophehad come up again. At this point, the people are getting ready to take possession of the land allotted to them. However, the people of Zelophehad's tribe, the tribe of Manasseh, are worried about his daughters intermarrying with other tribes, because doing so would give over their land to other tribes. For example, if Mala married someone from the tribe of Simeon, her husband would get her land as part of inheritance laws. However, as part of other laws, no land from one tribe could be permanently given to another tribe. Usually this wasn't a problem, because all the land belonged to men, so you can see how this was a unique situation. Once again, the issue was taken to God himself. He agreed with the tribe of Manasseh, and decided that if the daughters of Zelophehad wanted to marry, they had to marry within their father's tribal clan. The daughters eventually married to cousins on their father's side, which isn't all that weird in this time. Remember the first story? I like this story because not only does it show how involved God liked to be with his people, but that these women were intelligent and courageous enough to know their rights and to go to the leaders of their country to claim those rights. So often biblical women are put in these boxes of being timid or subservient, when most of the time that's not the case at all. I'll get into more of those stories in other videos, but I thought I'd start here because it's the first chronologically, and most don't know the story of Zelophehad's daughters. Those are all the niche Bible stories I have time for today. If you want to read them for yourself, I have them linked down below. My next video in this series will be about the judges, one of whom is also a woman. So let me know if you like this video, what I could do to improve it. I know that the way I tell stories isn't super witty or anything. I'm sure I will get more used to telling these stories as it goes along, but right now it's going to be kind of rough. So thank you for listening, and see you in the next one.